The entire table laughed when my father raised his glass on Thanksgiving and said, "Some kids make you proud. Others just take up space." My brother Mason smirked, lifting his own glass higher like he was toasting his own greatness, and the aunts and uncles chuckled right on cue. My mother's fork scraped her plate, her eyes glued to the porcelain. And me, I felt something inside me go perfectly, deadly still. I lifted my glass, smiled the calmest smile I'd worn in 28 years, and said, "Good thing I just closed on a condo 3,000 miles away. Because you'll never have to make space for me again." You could have heard snow fall. Forks froze halfway to open mouths. Dad's face flashed red, then white, then red again. Mason's smirk died mid-sip. I folded my napkin, pushed my chair back, and walked out without raising my voice once. The front door clicked shut behind me like the final period on a sentence I'd been writing my whole life. I grew up in a house where love came with a ranking system, and I was permanently stuck in last place. Our home in Indianapolis looked perfect from the street, with maple trees and a basketball hoop, but inside, it was a shrine to one person, my brother Mason. His football trophies glowed under dedicated spotlights in the hallway. My science fair medals and robotics plaques, they were stuffed in a drawer beneath old tax returns. When Mason scored a touchdown, Dad's clap shook the rafters. When I won the state engineering award at 14, Dad just patted my shoulder and muttered, "That's nice, Nora. Just don't make your brother feel bad." That single sentence became the soundtrack of my childhood. My mom wasn't cruel. She was terrified. Whenever Dad's voice rose, she would fold napkins into smaller and smaller squares and whisper, "Just let it go, sweetheart." Her silence taught me faster than any shouting ever could. My feelings were too big, too inconvenient, too loud. So I learned to disappear before I was even asked to. The basement became my sanctuary. It smelled of solder, dust, and possibility. While upstairs echoed with ESPN highlights and Mason's victory roars, I was downstairs, rebuilding broken radios and coaxing dead machines back to life. Machines never played favorites. They only cared if you understood them, and I did. Only one person ever truly saw me, Grandma Eleanor. Every Saturday, she'd arrive with warm blueberry turnovers and eyes that said I mattered. She'd de-sit on a wobbly stool under the single hanging light bulb in my basement workshop and ask, "Tell me what you're building this week, genius." She listened like my words were oxygen. "You see the world differently, Nora," she'd say. "Never let them convince you that's a flaw." I clung to those words the way drowning people cling to driftwood. At 18, I earned a full-ride scholarship to one of the best engineering programs in the country. I called home, shaking with the news. Dad didn't even lower his newspaper. "That far?" He grunted. "Figure it out yourself." So I did. I worked 3 jobs, took red-eye flights, packed everything into one duffel bag, and left Indianapolis without a goodbye party. I never looked back for applause that was never coming. 10 years later, I'm 28, a senior firmware engineer in Seattle, successful, quiet, and still invisible to the people whose DNA I carry. Thanksgiving rolls around. Grandma begs me to come home. Just this once. I booked the flight. I should have known better. The dining room table is exactly the same. Dad at the head like a king, Mason in the prince's chair, Mom fluttering around, and me, wedged at the end between nieces who barely know my name. That's when Dad stands, glass high, already smirking. "To family," he begins, then adds with a chuckle, "Some kids make you proud. Others, well, they just take up space." And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. I delivered my line about the condo, set my napkin down, and walked away. No tears, no yelling, just the soft, final click of the front door. As I drove through the empty streets, memories punched me one after another. Mason's brand new Jeep at 16 versus my hand-me-down Civic at 19. His full-ride football scholarship versus my student loans still choking me a decade later. His 300-guest wedding versus my college graduation with only 4 attendees, one of whom was my dad, complaining about the flight. By the time I reached the hotel, the hurt had turned into something cold, clear, and razor sharp. I texted Grandma, "Can I see you tomorrow?" She answered in seconds, "I've been waiting my whole life for this day." The next morning, we sat in a diner booth. The air smelled of bacon and redemption. Grandma didn't ask why I walked out. She just took my hands and said, "You look tired in your soul, baby." And I just broke. I told her everything. When I repeated Dad's toast, a single tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. Then she slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside were bank records, trust documents, and investment statements, all in my name. It was a trust my grandfather had set up the week I was born. The original balance, $1.4 million. The current balance, $11,400. Every withdrawal was labeled: family expenses, Mason's tuition, down payment, Mason's house, Mason's wedding, Mason's boat. Grandma's voice was steel. "Your father told me you didn't want it. Said you were too proud." I stared at the numbers until they blurred. 15 years of my future, stolen and laundered through my brother's perfect life. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went full engineer. First, I hired the best forensic accountant in Seattle. Second, I filed in probate court to remove my dad as trustee for breach of fiduciary duty. Third, I froze every remaining cent, and then I waited. 2 weeks later, a Christmas card arrived. It was the annual family photo with me carefully cropped out. Inside, Dad's handwriting read, "Looking forward to New Year's. Let bygones be bygones." I actually laughed out loud. On New Year's Eve, I hosted my own dinner in Seattle. A long walnut table, 12 identical chairs, no head seat. The people who chose me filled every one of them. Colleagues who stayed late to help me debug code. The neighbor who fixed my heater during a blizzard. My old professor who still writes my recommendation letters. We laughed until our sides ached. A cousin posted a photo online and captioned it, "Some people don't wait for a seat at the table. They build their own." On January 3rd, my phone rang. It was Dad. He didn't bother with hello. "The whole town is talking about your little show. Take those pictures down." I stayed silent. He screamed, "You're embarrassing this family." I finally spoke, my voice soft and lethal. "You embezzled my inheritance. Court papers are filed. You have 30 days to repay every dollar plus interest, or I go public with everything." There was dead silence. Then I choked. "You wouldn't dare." I simply said, "Watch me." I could hear Mason in the background yelling that I was bluffing. I forwarded the filed court petition right to the call. The line went quieter than a graveyard. Mason's voice finally cracked. "That money was for family." I replied, "I was family too," and hung up. 10 days later, a private courier delivered a single box to their doorstep. Inside was a bound, color-coded ledger of every stolen dollar. Glossy 11 by 14 photos of my Seattle life. One empty dining chair with a brass plaque that read, "Reserved for people who take up space," and a printed invitation to dinner in Seattle. Exactly 1 year from today, with one condition: equal seats or stay home. Dad fought it in court. He lost spectacularly when the judge saw withdrawals labeled Mason's boat and Mason's destination wedding. 1-point-3-8-$8 million plus 7% compounded interest landed in my account 72 hours later. The same week, Mason's wife filed for divorce when she learned how their lifestyle had been funded. The country club started whispering. The church prayer chain suddenly had new names at the top of the list. 1 year to the day, New Year's Eve again. My Seattle dining room glowed with candles and laughter. 12 chairs, all the same height, all full of people who love me out loud. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my parents. Dad looked 10 years older, his shoulders folded in a way I'd never seen. Mom clutched a bakery box of blueberry turnovers. Dad cleared his throat, his voice cracking. We brought dessert. Is there room? He gestured toward the table. I stepped aside. They saw the 12 identical chairs and 2 empty ones waiting at the end. Dad's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "There's room for us?" I just nodded once. They took the last 2 seats. No head of the table tonight. Just people trying, maybe too late, maybe just in time. I didn't forgive everything in a single evening, but I let them sit. I let them witness what a table looks like when no one has to shrink. Sometimes the coldest, sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's growth so bright they can't look away. It is building something so undeniably yours that the people who said you took up too much space finally have to admit you filled the whole world with a light they never bothered to see. And for the first time in my life, I took up every inch of the space I deserved. No apology, no permission needed. Just free. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.